is ready. Mike is ready. I'm ready for season 2. But the important question is, are you ready? Hey, welcome to the Mykel Broady podcast. I am Mykel Broady. Thank you so much for listening to season 2. Oxymoronic gems, and I know I have some explaining to do. Just so we're all clear, when I mean oxymoron, I'm referring to a figure of speech in which apparently contradictory terms appear in conjunction. So, for example, faithfully unfaithful, falsely true. I'm using examples here from Google, so thank you to our friends over there. But that's what we're going to talk about, oxymoronic gems. The goal is to look at seemingly opposing topics in society and find a way to harness it for our benefit in societies as well. And so as I was preparing for today's episode, expert, beginner, I think my mind drifted to a place of my current situation in college. You see, there's been this situation where I've always wanted to have a wide range of understanding in whatever I'm doing. I never wanted to rush into any field in particular. I thought it was kind of weird, going into college and they'd ask us to hurry up and specialize, hurry up and get into a major. What do you want to do in business? You want to do marketing? Do you want to do accounting, finance? And my response was always the same. I don't even know what business is. Let me figure it out. Let me figure out what I enjoy. Let me get my feet wet, my hands dirty in a lot of different areas so that I know what I enjoy, so that I know how I can best contribute. It's funny because you don't often hear people like that, I feel, or, when they ask you questions such as, oh, what are you doing? What's your major? What career are you thinking about in the future? I would always confidently tell people, I don't know right now. I'm just enjoying myself. I'm having fun. I'm trying to see what I do enjoy. I'm learning as much as I possibly can. And I always felt content with that. I always felt like I am making progress. And that one day when I do choose that career or careers, what if it's plural, I'm going to do something that I'm really passionate about. But in this society of where it may not be fully celebrated and appreciated, I came across an individual who saw right with me, who saw me eye to eye, even referenced a book called Range, and it touched on this idea of how having a wide range of understanding, how that can be so beneficial and give you an advantage over even those that may be experts. And so with that in mind, I saw this conversation as absolutely essential. I'm thankful to be joined today by that gentleman who I had that conversation with, the gentleman who introduced me to the book of Range, and an expert beginner himself, I must add. I'm joined by Chris Hess. Chris, thank you for joining me today, brother.
Such wise words, my friend. I think back to the time when I was a professor and students would come into that freshman orientation and they'd tell me, Dr. Hess, I want to be a doctor. I want to be a dentist. And I'd always say, well, what's your backup plan? And none of them had an answer, Mykel. They were just convinced to do that. And I remember the first time we chatted and you were not focused on like that one overarching goal. You were focused on being, well-versed in a lot of subjects. And I think, our conversation today, I hope we'll get to the point of like understanding what the value in that is. Because one thing I think about so much is like most of the successes you have in your life are because you like figure out a way to leverage connections. By being really broad in your ability to communicate about something, that affords you the opportunity to make a connection with just about anybody, right? Once you get your foot in the door with somebody, because you can see eye to eye them in college basketball, or you can see eye to eye with them on, the Crimean War, whatever it is that they're excited about. That gets you into a deeper level of collaboration. And so, I love this idea of beginner's mind. I love that book Range. So I'm excited to see where this conversation goes today.
Absolutely. I'm glad you are, because I'm right with you. And you brought up a good point about just being excited to do something new, being excited to try something different. And I know I'm talking to an expert beginner myself. I want to kind of get us started with a question of, what have you most recently begun?
Yeah, I got a couple of them that I thought I'd give you. One that is for fun, and then one that is more of a work-related type thing. So I know that you and I have dabbled in masterclass because that was something I got as a 2-for-1 gift for Christmas last year, and I made you my 2-for-1, so you got that, and we've been taking some of these classes together.
Thank you.
And one of the courses was an ukulele class, and I'm an expert beginner in music too. I can play a little bit of everything, but master none, and that's one of my philosophies in life. But there was a really cool ukulele class in there. And I thought about it, I'm like, this would be a fun thing to try for a number of reasons. One, because I think it's a really accessible instrument to beginners. And my son is in a really good place for kindling the magic of music, And so I was like, oh, well, we'll try this because it's a really easy instrument to get started on.
Okay.
And that's been really fun because he's like taking the ball and running with it. And now we sit down and play beautiful songs together, like Somewhere Over the Rainbow and Hallelujah and some really wonderful stuff. But one of the things I think was really fun about jumping into that instrument was it's really amenable to certain keys and certain chords that I avoided on other instruments. Just if anybody plays music, I grab a guitar and I play G, C, D. That's what I always play. If I can avoid anything else, I'll stick to that key. But the ukulele is really good at playing in the key of C, and there's these beautiful Hawaiian sounding chords that you can play really easily that would be hard to play on a guitar. So it's something where you try something new and it opens up this, world of possibilities. And I just love that feeling when you're like, okay, I would have never attempted this song on a guitar or on a banjo or something else or an organ or a piano. But now that I have this new thing to try, I'm like ready to go. And that's really neat, right? It's really a cool thing. And it's cool to see, that beginner's mind in students too. I think that's one thing that maybe we'll touch on more is sometimes being a beginner is very frustrating.
Right.
And I think it really underscores the value of a mentor or teacher or, maybe some technology that can help you figure out how to push yourself in the right way as a beginner. And then the second example is, work related. I work in product development. So my team works on building online homework systems for science courses. That means that we talk to software developers and we talk to UX designers a lot to try to create a really, what I like to say is an efficient and effective and engaging. And, I've been thinking about adding one more E, an equitable experience to using these products. And a lot of it, I think, is that we've gotten to a scenario where they just add in more features and the thing becomes more and more complex because we're trying to add one more thing to it. And so I've been taking some data analytics courses on Coursera and on UX design courses on Coursera, not necessarily because I want to become a data analyst or a UX designer, but I think there's something, I think Mickey Revenall might have touched on this in one of your early podcasts. When you don't feel like you're being a good enough partner with your collaborators, there's like this really cool thing where you can become a beginner in that and learn enough to be a better partner. And that's something I think about a lot is like, how can I learn just enough, like software coding or UX design or data analytics, so I can ask better questions and be more efficient and effective with my partner's time in order to, to come out with an outcome that really benefits, lifts all ships. I really love that idea, and it has been fun. I do love the UX design course, and yeah, it's been fun. One of the things I did is I built this beer garden, or like if you were in a tap room app,
right,
and it would help you make recommendations for like what beer you would get. And the really cool thing that came out of it was, I've been interviewing people for trying to do the best thing with limited resources for a long time. And I was really surprised that I got some really cool tips on like how to be a better interviewer. And I thought it was pretty good, but I think one of the things that a beginner's mind, maybe we'll touch on more if we have time, is that takes you out of confirmation bias. That's one of, I think, the real big benefits is that you aren't seduced by your own opinion because you may not have a strong opinion at that point. And I get really excited about an idea that I have that might, change the world or make it better for students or teachers. And I think it's really important that you don't lead the witness in some of these interviews and make sure that you're just like, tell me I'm right, Mykel.
Yep.
I got this great idea. You have to be really thoughtful about giving them the opportunity to give you the next best idea that is not on your radar, because it's really easy just to get seduced by the one thing that you think about. So there's a couple new beginner things that I've been working on lately.
There's so many places I want to go from that. And I just, maybe the first one that's most recent, what you just said there about interviewing and becoming a better interview and letting them give you the content, letting them kind of almost lead the conversations in a way, letting them tell the story at times. And that's how I felt about the podcast. touched on this a lot of times, but I would go into preparation in the episode and, okay, what questions do I want to ask them and where do I want to go? But so often it was like the best comes from just being spontaneous and seeing where our minds meet at this moment. And so I absolutely agree with that. I also want to tell the audience, this is just a friendly reminder of why I brought Chris on this episode in particular. He's just an absolutely expert beginner. It's inspiring to hear of these projects. And oftentimes when we would get on the phone with one another, one of our earliest questions would be, what are you working on? What's some of the new things you're doing? Because I think for both of us, it just gave us so much life to hear of another beginner, someone else who's, fighting the good fight. And so thank you for being that living, breathing example every time we chat, man.
Yeah. I mean, right back at you, right? I mean, we started this off as like let's have a monthly conversation, because it'll be, I can maybe be a little bit of a mentor, but I always say this. And I think one of the things as a beginner, you should be well aware of is that people do want to help. Like it's not a one-way street on these things. I mean, I get arguably way more from you than you get from me, but it's a mutualistic thing. And yeah, I mean, I feel like that accountability, I love it, right? Like, I feel like when I'm like, okay, I got a conversation coming up with Mykel, I gotta make sure I've done something that's gonna impress that guy, and I think it is really, like just having that in the back of your mind is really important. Having those people in your life that inspire you is seek those people out and don't be afraid to ask for their help a little bit. Most of us really enjoy having a chance to talk to people who are at a point where they are a beginner in some respects, and like helping guide them on the right way. Being a beginner can be frustrating. I think the key to being effective as a beginner is to not aim too high. I think about this particular concept called the zone of proximal development a lot. We think about personalized learning a whole lot. And let me give you an analogy that I think is really good here. One of my goals by the end of the year is to do 20 unassisted continuous pull-ups, right?
Love it.
It's like kind of a good goal. Like I want to do 20 in a row. I've never been able to do 20 in a row without stopping. Somebody who has never done a pull-up, that's just an unreasonable goal, right? I mean, like to even like think about that is ridiculous. So somebody has to help you, or you have to figure out, maybe I don't even need to do one right now. I need to like get a band and help pull myself up to do one. And that's where you start. And then, you know what is awesome when you do one without the band? What an accomplishment, right? When you do 5, that's a huge accomplishment. And then 10, and so on and so forth. But like finding what's the thing that, the Kaizen method or anything like that, little bit incremental gains add up. One of my main philosophies in life is that for just about anything, if you find that little zone of making yourself a little bit better every day, you can accomplish just about anything. But finding that place where the learning is real but not frustrating is really hard.
Chris, I love that. And can you remind me of the phrase again? Zone
of proximal development.
Zone of proximal development. I like the way that sounds.
Yeah.
Well, I also want to touch on a point you brought up earlier when you said just your preparation into the calls and excited to share your ideas. Know that every time we talk, I'm just excited to have the opportunity. I'm just excited that you're actually trying to do something. You're trying to learn something new. Trust that we both get a lot out of this relationship. I want to go into something as well. I know we want to talk about beginner. We want to go into the benefits. You already hinted at one with kind of almost bypassing confirmation bias, or at least avoiding it in a good way. But I realize we're almost at a disadvantage when we begin this argument to, hey, be a beginner, be an expert one at that, because being a beginner doesn't really have a favorable connotation, if we may. And so I believe it's great for us to start off on maybe why is that? Maybe kind of looking at why there's some misconceptions out there so that we can get into those beginner benefits and we can see why being a beginner is so amazing. And so are you cool with that, Chris?
Yeah, that sounds good.
What are some common misconceptions you've heard or even once believed in terms of being a beginner?
Yeah, I was thinking about this one, and I think the biggest thing is that we were kind of touching on this is a lot of times people they see an expert and they think that expert just be like it was all talent, right? And like this is something that was innate.
Yep.
And I was trying to allude to this with the idea of the proximal development stuff. Is most people didn't start off as an expert. I love my son to death, but he's like this little dude who like thinks that he like can play tennis. He's been on tennis camp this week, and I'm sure like at the end of the week he thinks he's ready to play Wimbledon, right? He has this idea that he's kind of the outlier. Most people are like, there's no way I could possibly ever do that. But like, he's been at this for a week, right? He's been at this camp. So I think he's improved every day. He's probably way better than he was, on Sunday when I hit balls around with him on the court. I think the thing that people think is that most of being an expert is driven by talent. And I think most of being an expert is driven by incremental gains over time. That's where it's really valuable to try to figure out, well, how can I put myself in that position where I'm not aiming too far? So I think the biggest misconception is that experts, they got there without hard work along the way, potentially. I think that's the main one that I think about. And then the other biggest thing is that people suffer from is, a lot of imposter syndrome. I don't know if this misconception, but like if you are honest with yourself and other people that you don't know something, most people are pretty empathetic to that. It's really easy just to say, well, I can't do that, I'm going to give up. But you know what? If people are working with you on a project, or you say, hey, I want to do this, and they have some expertise, most people are willing to offer that and to be pretty accommodating with you.
I just feel like you're speaking right to me and kind of a bit of my story, and I think this is going to get at something that maybe a lot of people can resonate with. And so hopefully this is helpful that we're addressing it. But you hear Carol Dweck's The Growth Mindset, right? Do you believe that you have the ability to constantly grow over time, that your intelligence, that your knowledge is not fixed, but rather you have the opportunity to grow and develop it, throughout the course of time? And that's something that I really related to growing up. I think this also touches on imposter syndrome. And so I don't want to go too far ahead of myself, but there was times where I did feel like an imposter when you would be in those honors classes, when you would be in, even a college classroom, and you don't see a lot of people that look like you. You don't see on the TV scholars that are Black. And so in my mind, it was always weird to me initially when I would have this intelligence, when I would feel like I had this unique insight, but it contradicted my silhouette in a way. I remember I'd sit there in second and third grade classes, and you would see the kids that would always answer all the questions, and they would be right. I remember as a kid, I would think, those are the smart people. I'm not one of them. Like, that's how toxic it was for me in second and third grade, is you would see these people answering all the time. And that was me saying, oh, she's just a smart one. She was born smart. I would go into fourth grade, 2 years down the road, and they would have GATE program, the gifted and talented education. And I wasn't a part of that. And so what did I do? I just thought to myself, well, maybe I'm not intelligent. Maybe I'm not gifted and talented like these other students that get to go off, in the middle of class. And that really hurt me. But it came a point to where I had to strip away from that. When I got into high school, and it was almost because of necessity. I realized in middle school, if I want to go to college, I don't want to just rely on sports like is typically said, because I see the numbers, look at the statistics. It's very rare. And not that I don't want to bet on myself, but there's other areas that I feel I have talent in as well. And so when I stopped playing basketball going into high school, I just put myself in all honors classes. I'm just like, I'm going to do this. I believe in myself. I know what I'm worth. I know what I can do. And so I did that, and year after year, I would get straight A's. And it's so cool now that it's almost like I'm in the flip position. Now I'm in college and I haven't got a B since 2015 or 14. And I see that there's people around me that look at me as if, oh, he's just a smart guy. Oh, he's just the guy that he was born this way. He's just an expert naturally. And it's like, no, it's a journey. It's the growth mindset. And so thank you for just speaking to me, because that's what it reminded me of, that misconception that we just were born this way. No, we made it this way. We developed ourselves to be this type of person. And it's a consistent daily effort. And so thank you for bringing that up, Chris.
Was there somebody who instilled that philosophy in you, or was that something that you did that you discovered on your own? I'm curious.
That's an amazing question. And I think it's a mixture of both, because I had amazing people in my life. The Jessica Broady segment is here, people. My mom, Jessica Broady, she just would always tell me to, do what I'm passionate about, do what I enjoy. And so with that in mind, that's what I'm constantly gauging my actions off of. And so if I'm not enjoying something, or even to get to your point earlier with, she just instilled that confidence in me that I can be whatever I want to be. I know that sounds cliche, but that's how I walked into the room. I know I'm capable of this. My mom, the people in my corner that love me, they see me, they see the world in me. And so that's what I'm gonna be, because I know I'm that. It's almost a looking glass self. You see your potential from the people around you. And so I love that question. It's hard to pinpoint on an exact person or an exact moment. I think it was just a continuous effort to support me and encourage me to constantly pursue what I enjoy and trust that I can do whatever I desire.
I tell people that are teachers still, spend some time talking about this stuff. The first chapter of a new organic chemistry textbook that we just published recently, the first chapter is all about the growth mindset. Like this is your opportunity to better yourself. Look, give me incremental gains on anything for the most part. If somebody is behind me and believes in me enough so that I believe in myself and can help me, then I can get there.
Chris, I think this is a great mini challenge in the episode here for the listeners. Let me know, what's a story you have of maybe a moment, maybe even now, where you're trying to work on something consistently, slowly but surely. Share your experience with us. We'd love to hear it. But also, Chris, I'd like to kind of shift the conversation a bit more into why we might be innately unfavorable to the idea of being a beginner. You know, why it feels like, that's a little weird. And I think because it's so far away from completion, it feels like. When you're a beginner, you're not an expert. You're far from, you have to accept incompletion when there's this level of being a beginner. And we know that's not easy. You know, you think of the like a progress bar when you're downloading the newest update. You just hate when it's like halfway there. You just want it to be finished. You know, you talk about people go into relationships. I want someone who completes me. When it comes time to accept being incomplete, that can be tough at times. And I think that may be one of the many reasons too, you know, why there's kind of unfavorable connotations and ideas towards being a beginner. Do you have any others, or even want to expand on that one?
Well, I do want to expand upon that one. I think one of the best things that you can do, you need to be thoughtful about having aspirational goals and goals that are really tangible and near term. So I always think about that. Like, you know, okay, but last June, my goal was to run a half Ironman, and it was really hard. I did not start with that though, right? Start with some really achievable, tangible goals. And the human nature is that we're very dopamine driven, right? Like we want to have a win. Every time we get a win, we want another win, right? So give yourself those wins. You got to figure out what those goals are. And I have a general philosophy of thinking about, okay, start at the aspirational goal and do backwards design. So work backwards from that goal until now and give yourself goals along the way that you can use as benchmarks or near-term goals. So I think that's a really good philosophy to get to that long-term thing, because what's tough about the beginner is that you can't even imagine how I'm going to get to that aspirational point. But if you map it out like that, it becomes much more reasonable. Look, I'm not trying to get to 70.3 miles on the bike and a mile and a quarter swim and a half marathon. Yeah. I'm just trying to be able to do a little bit of each of those things. You know, in the end, you look up and you've hit each of those goals along the way over the course of your journey. And it'll often feel hard, but it'll never, if you have those tangible, achievable, some people call it SMART goals, then in the end, those just build upon each other, you know, and it feels like instead of having to jump up to the next story, you're going upstairs, right? And stairs are doable.
Consistent progress. I like what you're bringing up there. Like, not looking at things as like an on and off switch. You're there, you're not. But it's a range. And how can you better gauge where you're at in that range, on that spectrum? Where are you at? Because you may not be an expert quite yet, but you're much farther than when you started. And I think it really gets at this almost this condition I learned about in Econ 365. I don't know why I just said the name, but labor economics. And we spoke on the Sisyphus condition. And what this is all about is they did a study where they had two groups build Legos. But one group in particular, they got to see their progress. So as they kept building more Legos and being incentivized and more they built, they got to see what they built before. But another group, they would destroy whatever they built as soon as they built one. And so as they built two, they couldn't see the progress on the first one. And what they saw after doing the results was that the group that was able to see their progress over time, that could see all the buildings they've done, they built more on average. And so it was cool. I feel like it touches on that, really being sure when we're on this beginning journey, do we have those touch points? Do we have those kind of gauges for us to see, okay, we are making progress?
Yeah, I love that analogy. I mean, I love the Sisyphus thing is really good. I mean, don't push that rock up a hill and watch it roll back. That's a frustrating feeling, right? Because you're just trying to get to the top. But if you can think of that even as a series of ledges, get it up to a ledge, you're making it up there eventually. Honestly, like in these online systems, I think a lot about like how can we make it so that you're giving people those carrots along the way. Another good book you should read sometime is by Nuriel, a book called Hooked. And it's these are things about like how can you hijack the human condition for good. And my wife talks about this a lot. She's like, you're kind of an addictive person in a lot of ways. But you try to channel that in a way that is good.
You touched on moving forward and you touched on winning. And so I want to include both those into my next question here as we move forward into the conversation, closer now towards why being a beginner is so amazing, getting now deeper into the benefits. But Chris, for you in particular, were there any experiences you've had that changed your perception of being a beginner? Like what drives you to begin so many new things today?
It creates common ground for all of your experiences in life. And one of my main philosophies in being effective in life is most of it is because of connections with people, right? And so if you can become past a beginner on anything, which isn't that hard. I mean, think about, I can become somebody who can have a conversation, a remedial one in Spanish pretty quickly if I put effort in. And then I just find it so validating. Now, maybe I learn a little bit of Spanish. Now I can talk to all these other people. I have a connection with them.
Right.
Or, like the biggest running joke is if you become a triathlete, all you do is talk about triathlon. When I'm in Zoom calls with people, I look in the background for something that I know something about that's going to be a hook for that connection. Wow. So that's to me, the biggest thing about being a beginner is it affords you a way to connect with a greater group of people. And it's not an exploitative thing, Mykel. It's not like I'm trying to get something out of you.
Yeah.
Because I feel like most of the time it ends up being like, we're gonna be better together than we are by ourselves. Right. And so if I can figure out some way to figure out, well, what is it that pushes Mykel's button so that I can learn more about him, find out the things that motivate him, and then maybe down the road there'll be something where I have this project and I need somebody to do some, a podcast. Like if I was going to do that, I would be like, well, here's a guy I can call because I know that that's like in your wheelhouse. I think the big key is being a beginner or getting past that very, very beginner stage on something makes you conversant on it. And it affords you the ability to connect with a greater group of people. And those connections are what leads to progress on most of the important things in your life.
This idea of being a beginner and it being a catalyst for further connecting with other people is something that's very new to me, at least in understanding. You get it to some extent when people are joining an acting class and, oh my gosh, I'm meeting so many new people. But I think how you've articulated it throughout the course of this conversation is really refreshing and thought-provoking. And so thank you for bringing that perspective. And I think that offers us a fine segue as well into more of these beginner benefits. And I have three in particular I want to touch on. How I'm going to describe these benefits, I'm going to share something that it forces you to do. And I know right when I say force, people are like, they might start tuning out because whenever you're forced to do something, it may not be as appealing. And so for everything that's forced, we're going to keep with our oxymorons here. I'm going to provide something that you are given, some type of freedom that you are given through this as well. And so we'll begin with the first benefit here that we have. You are forced to apply a wide range of understanding when you're a beginner. You are forced to apply a wide range of understanding. But at the same time, you are given the freedom to explore. So you are forced to apply a wide range of understanding, yet simultaneously you are given the freedom to explore. And this really touches on the beginner advantage for me, Chris, and it really emphasizes what we've been able to read in David Epstein's amazing book, Range. How does this benefit relate to you? How do you kind of associate this benefit in your mind? And how would you describe this unique beginner advantage?
Yeah, I think of this twofold, and this might touch on some of the other benefits. I think there's some overlapping things. Is
Awesome.
the wide range of understanding thing, I think, is the key here, because I mentioned the connections of people, but I think the other place where there's real value is the connections between different modalities or ideas, things like that. So you can think of this on an individual level. If I'm working on this, if I know something about something else where there is some relation that might not be apparent to somebody who's an absolute expert in that one idea, you might not see the connection. There's a great bit in this in Range on research groups. And it turns out that the most effective scientific research labs in the world have a diverse group of individuals in there. They're not just a bunch of molecular biologists. They have some molecular biologists, they have some data analysts, they have some, maybe some people who study photosynthesis, some people who study biochemistry. And it's important for those different individuals to bring connections from their main place of expertise into the collective. And you can do that on an individual level, or you can do that because you have a breadth of understanding, or you can do that in a team where there's different individuals that bring things together. And so ultimately it comes down to this general philosophy of, the sum of the parts is greater than what you would expect, right? Because those connections are where the real opportunities come up. And I love that idea because it's really easy, and it's kind of relatable back to confirmation bias, right? Because if you're just an expert in your field, you might not see these other possibilities out there because you're so focused and have these blinders on it. Having that wide range of understanding because you become a beginner in a lot of things can help you as an individual. And then think of that more broadly when you surround yourself with individuals, so you don't just have a bunch of people who think the same way you do.
Right.
You're limiting yourself on that front.
Keeps us rooted in reality, because how many issues can be confined to one field of study, for being realistic?
Well, yeah, and just think about the times when somebody has asked you an unexpected question that changed your way of thinking. It's a really cool feeling. I mean, you got to be open to it. You can't be like so locked into your way of thinking. Again, confirmation bias. But if you're open to that idea and somebody comes at you with something that makes you think again, I mean, a cliche from Adam Grant, but I've tried, that's one of my things that I've really worked on over the last couple of years. Don't get so married to your idea. Think about the problems that we're trying to solve. Don't think about the solutions. If you think carefully about the problems and you help people articulate, think about how you're going to solve this. And there's a whole philosophy called design thinking that I highly recommend people do. It doesn't just work for product development. It works for basically any opportunity that you can think of.
Absolutely. And let's move into the next benefit.
All right.
The next one being, you are forced to rely immensely on the person you see in the mirror, but you are given the freedom to show yourself and the world how great you are. And so, Chris, I wanted to touch on this one in particular, because I know you had an interesting moment. You were a professor at Butler University, correct?
That's correct.
But then you made the transition at some point to corporate. And I know that was a world of new beginnings. And so I would love to hear, how does you feel like this benefit, how did this relate for you in your life when you were entering corporate? Yeah,
I think, Mykel, one of the things I would highly recommend people think about with respect to this one is think about sunk costs. A really great book. Let me see if I have it here. It's not on my desk. It's called The Voltage Effect. It's actually by a Pearson author. And the idea is, look, I was a professor. I was on the tenure track. I was being successful, but I wasn't sure that this was what I wanted to do with my life long term. And I think it's very, very hard. I mean, I had spent 25 years in school, basically, right? I mean, I got a PhD. It's very hard to say, I'm going to try something else. But you know what? All that stuff is in the past, right? You're not giving that up. And you're actually like, you should make decisions on what you think today. So like, imagine it looks like it's going to rain out here in Blacksburg. If I had tickets to a show and it was going to be a miserable experience to go get rained on for the night, my general gestalt would be, well, I'm going to go anyway because I spent money on those tickets. But you know what? You shouldn't really think that way. You should think, what's going to be the best experience tonight? Because that money's gone, right? Those years of being educated, you're not obligated to those anymore if something else will make you happier going forward. that is a philosophy of a beginner, because you need to be willing to become a beginner again. Mm. And I've thought about this many times. Like maybe this isn't the end for me. I might do something completely different again. And like during COVID, I became a triathlon coach. I probably won't do that forever. In fact, maybe that's a sunk cost for me, because I'm not making much money off of that. I'm just doing it for fun, and that's all right. But if it's not providing joy to me, I should leave it behind. And I think that's really, really hard for people to do, because that's human nature to think, mm-hmm. I invested all this in there. I got to follow through. Like think about, if you're going to do something different, why not do it now? Why not do it today? Being a beginner is scary, but I think part of it is think of your happiness going forward, not in the past.
I want to add on to that amazing insight. It really speaks to, we're learning what we don't know about ourselves. If we want to be lifelong learners, if we're excited to know who the person we see in the mirror is, we got to put ourselves in uncomfortable situations. And you touched on human nature. Human nature is to be comfortable. Human nature is to see patterns of behavior and repeat them, because that's easier. That our brain doesn't have to work as hard. But when we're forced to be when we're a beginner, we're forced to really rely on ourselves, because we have no patterns of behavior to count on. It's up to now. But on top of that, you get to learn about yourself. Because what if you are an amazing podcast host? Well, now you know this. Now you get to improve on. Now you get to see how this could help out others around the world.
Yep. Being comfortable being uncomfortable is kind of the definition of zone of proximal development. I think you're not improving if you're not getting there, right? And so you're spot on. You nailed it.
Not improving, and I feel like it's hard to improve if you're not asking questions, which leads me into the third benefit I want to speak on, which when you're a beginner, you are forced to ask questions. You don't know the answers. You are forced to ask questions, but what freedom does that give you? It gives you the freedom to learn. Gives you the freedom to learn. I like to say the most knowledgeable thing you can do is acknowledge where you lack knowledge. What are your thoughts on that, Chris?
Man, I love it. So I always said that the biggest success in my class when I was a professor was you becoming better, and this translated well beyond a biology course that I was teaching, is you diagnosing what you know and what you don't know. But that is a gift. If you can do that. And so I would give these review sessions. I'd say, hey, I'll come over here on Thursday night before the test, and I'll offer myself up to answer questions. And they say, well, Dr. Hess, could you give me a review sheet? I say, well, I guess, but I mean, the review sheet was all those PowerPoints I gave you and all those lectures I gave you over the time. So I would just take all the bulleted terms and I would list them out. And I would tell them, if you come in and ask me, what do I need to know about oxidative phosphorylation or, electron transport chain or whatever, photosynthesis, whatever, I'm going to tell you to get out of here. But you come and ask, I'm unclear about this, and I'd like to know specifically why this is. So ask a good question. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the things about being a beginner is you kind of have this freedom to ask questions, right? I mean, like you might be frustrated by not knowing, but you're also kind of off the hook for being an expert. So you're free to ask. Now you should still ask good questions, because, that's important. I mean, don't just say, hey, what do I need to know about this? Or can you tell me about science? That's too broad. You got to be able to pin it down to something that's reasonable. But I think there's so much value in self-assessing what you know and what you don't know, because that affords you the ability to find the answer.
And I think that brings up another mini challenge to offer to the listeners, because yes, absolutely. When you're a beginner, you have that freedom to ask all these questions, and you may not be punished for it. But why should we ever be punished in the first place for asking questions? Like, that's something that just came to the forefront of my mind. And so I want to challenge the listeners out there. In what areas can you begin to ask more questions in your life, at your work, wherever you find yourself? How can you ask more questions? But on the flip side, how can you create environments around you? How can you create a culture of how you just carry yourself to where people feel safe to ask questions to you? And something where, yes, even though it makes sense that beginner may have more leeway, we should still have leeway at the end of the day, because at the end of the day, we're still exploring, we're still learning, we're all still beginners in some sense.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. Even though you become maybe quote unquote an expert in something,
right?
Don't get away from that beginner's mind. I mean, you think of kids and their curiosity when they're young. They ask why all the time. We should do that more. We should never get away from that. Stop getting away from that.
That's why I tell people we should stop getting away from it. If anything, we're now equipped to ask better questions, to tackle bigger issues.
100%.
Love it. Well, I want to do a call to action to the audience as well. Like this season in particular, I really want to hear your feedback. Thank you, by the way, to Chris for being a spotlight in our last listener feedback episode. But I want to give a call to action to the audience to brainstorm other possible benefits. I know that the 4 we discussed so far are not alone in any way, shape, or form. And so, please let me know. And one way you can do so is on the website. If you go on the mykelbroadypodcast.com, you'll see that you can go on to episodes and there's a comment section. I would love for our listeners to comment more under there so I can hear your insight and you can be deeply involved into the conversation just like we are. And so as we wrap up today, I just want to again thank Chris for being here, but he's not done. As you know, what challenge do you have for all of our listeners, including myself, Chris?
All right, I'll do a couple of bullets because I think there's so many that could come out of this one. The first is the challenge to find somebody who can be a teacher or a mentor for you in something and ask them if they are willing to foster your development in some way. I think it's really scary for a lot of people, Mykel. I think that's a misconception that most people are not willing to do it. I mean, I would say if you contact somebody who you respect and you want to do this, make it very clear what you're trying to get out of it. So I encourage people to do that. And then I think it's really simple, right? I mean, we've been talking all about incremental gains. I want people to, pick something that they've thought was too much. Maybe it is, my wife always gives me a hard time because she's like, well, Chris, what you do is like you go from like one major challenge to the next. And I don't have one on my calendar right now, which is kind of an oddity for me. But she's like, why can't you just do a couple of short triathlons again? I'm like, nope, I'm going to pick a massive one because it feels like a major accomplishment. It doesn't have to be a huge, huge thing, but pick something that you've really wanted to do and put it on your calendar and think about the incremental ways that you can get there. I promise you that if you do that thoughtfully, almost anything, you can get to the top of that mountain. And then the third one is see if you can do more pull-ups. Whatever you can do now, just try to get a little bit better.
Well, thank you for that. And I got to say, Chris, your wife was absolutely correct. You do have an addiction, but what I can tell you, you're addicted to constantly beginning something new. You're addicted to constantly betting on yourself, to constantly helping others learn and improve. Thank you for joining me on the show, my friend. To my listeners, my other friends, I hope that this episode kind of opened your mind in some sense to the true benefit of being a beginner, to maybe giving you the freedom to be one. I know that at times it may feel like we can't have this type of philosophy in this type of society, but we can. Each and every day you can bet on yourself. Each and every day you can learn something new. Put yourself in an uncomfortable position. Be an expert beginner. And the closing question I have for you is, how can you do that? How can you be an expert beginner? Next week, moving forward, what you can expect on the podcast, I'll be joined by my lovely mother, Miss Jessica Broady. We'll be talking a lot about my experiences throughout the past semester, some of my financial struggles, and we're going to get real vulnerable, but that's exactly what you should always expect from this podcast. Thank you for listening. I hope you have a tremendous day. Begin something new. All right? And let's get to some of these groovy tunes.
I'm Chris Hess, guest of the Mykel Broady podcast. It's no ukulele, but I do love a funky bass line and some Fender Rhodes. So let's close it out that way.